I'm Vicky Nguyen, and you're listening to In Her Words.
Everyone has a story. Welcome to In Her Words, a podcast from women in entertainment where female creatives and allies share their stories in their own words.
This is a dedicated space centered on how to harness creativity for inspiring and impactful projects in the ever-changing landscape of entertainment.
I'm Renee Rossi.
I'm Gretchen McCourt.
And this is In Her Words.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to In Her Words. Vicky Nguyen is an investigative and consumer reporter for The Today Show and the anchor of NBC News Daily. She now adds published author to her list of accolades, as her biography, Boat Baby, is now available. Vicky tells her story with such honesty and humor. It is a great read. We talked with Vicky for so long. It was such a fun conversation, and she's one of those people you immediately feel like you've known forever. We hope you enjoy as much as we did. Because of your book, I had to look up, I'm also the year of the horse.
Yes, I love that. That means we're 12 years apart or the same year.
We are 12 years apart. I'm 100 years older than you.
Stop.
So it is, and then I was just telling Renee the antics of one of my sons, Brady, and he is also a horse.
Oh my God, too funny.
Yeah.
I love it. One of the best. I feel like it's one of the best.
You made me, because you said you and your dad are, right?
We are. My mom is a rat. Very ironic because she really hates rodents and all things related to mice or hamsters or guinea pigs. She was a real soldier to let me have both a hamster and a guinea pig when I was growing up, because that's like, you know how people have a phobia of like snakes or whatever. Hers was rodents, but she still very kindly let me have them as pets.
I love it. I love it. So, Vicky, thank you so much for joining us. This is so exciting. You are, I think, one of our first journalists that we've had on. I love it. And we loved your book. Thank you so much for sharing it with us early. I just started crying when I was reading the end, your letter to your girls. It's so lovely. So tell us kind of what at this point of your career, of your life, really made you decide to sit down and do this right now.
Well, I'm so delighted to be with you both. Thank you for having me. And I have to say, I was always an avid reader as a kid. I always loved books. They transported me everywhere. It was Beverly Cleary. It was Roald Dahl. It was The Babysitter's Club, Sweet Valley Twins, Encyclopedia Brown. I'm dating myself. But, you know, anything I could get my hands on, I loved to read. And I think at some point you go into a journalism career as a writer and you just think, how cool would it be to have a book someday? You know, like to have an ISBN, like a little number that marks like you wrote a book and we recognize it. And this is the unique identifier for it. And so when the opportunity came up to kind of put my family's story down on paper and write this as a tribute to my parents, but also the many parents who know what it's like to make incredible sacrifices, because all you really want is to give your kids the best shot at making a life for themselves as you can. And then becoming a parent myself to 3 daughters, having a book that they could look at, that they could read about their grandparents and also their mom. It just was such an opportunity, and I'm so grateful for it. So, you know, there's no time like the present. The opportunity came up, and I thought, this is the story that I want to write. And I want to remind people what a great country this is and why people do risk their lives to come here, and why diversity really is what makes America great. Like, the fabric of America is built on different cultures, different languages, different people from all around the world. And that is one of our biggest superpowers.
I love that message in the book of hope and optimism, and you writing it in this present day with that same hope and optimism that your parents, experienced and with their harrowing trip, and, you know, everything that they went through to come to the United States and to bring you here, and the optimism they saw, and you kind of echoing that in this current. It was very refreshing. It was nice to see that, to see that from you.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. I think the timing, people have asked me, like, are you so happy it came out right now at this moment? And I have to say, fate is a recurring theme in the book, right? Like, I control the things I can control, but there's so much that happens in life that you cannot control. And it is about how you react to it, what you do, how you move through it. But I am so happy it is coming out right now at this very moment. Not only is this April 30th, the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, the end of the war, but also I think in this time, we could use a little dose of optimism, a little dose of like a little reminder of what the American spirit is, the generosity of the people who live in this country, and what it means to look out for your neighbor, and the community bonds that ultimately make us all stronger.
One of the other themes that I felt so strongly reading it was kind of brutal honesty. I mean, you not only the story of your parents and why they were leaving Vietnam and why they were coming here, but your part. I mean, so many times people, we read books of women we admire, and it's about their career. But I so appreciated being a working mother, and Renee's a working mother, and that you were honest about all of it. I mean, the conversations that you and Brian had to have on, making decisions on career, and the conversations it was very, you were real in your work stories and your personal stories that, obviously made those decisions and added to those decisions. You were honest about, how you were, with your parents and what they were doing and your feelings about that. Did it start out that way? Or was there something that you modeled about that you were like, all right, here we are, good, bad, and ugly. This is my story.
I think I don't really know how to be any other way. So the inelegant answer is I wrote it the way I speak, the way I live, and I can be sort of direct and honest to a fault. I'm not a great person to beat around the bush or be careful with my words sometimes, depending on the context. If it's for someone else, then I try to communicate with that person the way they want to be communicated to. I learned that lesson early on. Like, you need to talk to people the way they want to be talked to, not the way you want to be talked to. That was such an epiphany for me. But when I'm writing about myself, I am a really direct and honest and kind of just a put it all out there kind of person. I know my intentions, and I think I don't know any other way to be than sort of raw and genuine. Now, when you are talking about people who are alive and in your life now, currently, that gets a little tricky because a memoir is your experience, your point of view, your memories, and your take on how things went in your life, good, bad, and ugly. So I tried to take great care with those recollections. My husband would dispute that first chapter because his take is that's not at all what I meant, that that I supported you, like you're making it seem like I wasn't all in. And I'm like, you weren't all in the beginning. That's true. And I'm glad you weren't. Like, the fact that you were a bit of an obstacle, the fact that you were the practical person thinking rationally and taking me through the steps it would take to move our family of 5 plus my parents from the West Coast to the East Coast. What are we doing this for? What all will this entail? My little mind and heart were already in New York City, but I'm glad he made me go through that exercise because, number one, it's a partnership. Marriage is making sure that the team is reaching the goals together. And number two, like, he helped me to negotiate a better salary for myself than I would have otherwise. No question about it. He wasn't trying to move for no money or no increase in our quality of living. And so I'm super grateful to him. And I hope that as the book progresses, that becomes abundantly clear that I am the product of, the great parents that I have and the sacrifices that they have made. My success is their success, but also the village it takes and the partnership it takes with my husband to get to decisions that make sense for all of us as a family. So yeah, it is tricky to write about your recollections when there are other perspectives involved, and you just kind of have to go by it as earnestly and honestly as you can. And I thought it was important because when you are vulnerable, when you do talk about the things that you've been through, so have other people. Family is messy. Relationships are messy. Parenting is messy. And so when we can be honest about that, it forges all these amazing connections that we might not otherwise have if everyone's being very polite and politically correct and dancing around things and delicate and not really opening up.
Yeah, and you can assure Brian he did not come off that way. And I mean, he has a huge career as well. It's, I can't imagine looking at the offer from NBC and, your husband's an anesthesiologist in a practice that he loves, which I think we learned about later. But still, it could never be something that was like, yes, honey, no, a 3 second, decision to do that. No, it
Totally.
came off, and I really loved the, like, oh, there she did, there are bumps along the way because, we see, beautiful women on television and we think, oh, it's, behind the scenes, it's just like that. There's no bumps in the road and there's no, she's flawless at all times and she must have this, perfect, like you said, little village behind her taking care of everything. And I so appreciated the vulnerability and the honesty that you showed throughout the whole thing of, sleepless nights and dogs and kids and parents and, and making decisions along the way. I thought it was very refreshing, and I think it gives all of us hope that what's out there.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Vicky, I'd love to start a little bit back in terms of before the book, right? Within her words, one of the things that we really talk about is, how you came to doing what you're doing, right? And I know that your book obviously covers that, but in your words, obviously for our audience, I'd love to have you just talk a little bit about your path and backtrack a little bit in terms of how you came to be who you are today.
From a career perspective, is that where
From a
you'd like
career,
me to start?
yeah, from a career perspective,
Okay.
because I think that you've had such an interesting background that's probably put so much color, into your career and so forth. So it'd be great to have you kind of give your story in your words.
Sure. Like a lot of little Asian kids, I thought I was going to pursue a career in medicine. And originally, I wanted to be a heart surgeon because I just thought that sounded cool. And then at one point, when I was like 12 or 13, my parents had this furniture store and it was kitty corner to a veterinary clinic. And the doctor there was incredible. And she kind of just let me be this little intern and show up every day during the summer and give vaccinations to dogs and cats and clean up the tables and, draw injections and watch surgeries. And then my cat allergy became too much. And I decided that probably wasn't going to be a good path for me. But I still wanted to stay in the medical field. So when I enrolled in college at the University of San Francisco, I studied biology as my major, and I did a bunch of internships at physical therapist offices, because I remember back then in like 1996, 97, those little career reports would come out and say like, here are the professions that are the top growing, most stable, and physical therapist was one of them. But halfway through my college career, sophomore year, I'm in the cafeteria and I meet this guy. He's Chinese Vietnamese. He's super charismatic, really handsome, very talkative. And he tells me how he is doing a bunch of internships at the local TV stations. And I'm looking at him, Tuan Lam, a dear friend of mine to this day, and I'm thinking, TV reporter, like, I know what you're talking about. I watch the news. I have seen these people. I have never thought that I could pursue that career path. But here you are, and we're very similar, and you're making it seem so possible. You're providing this path and these steps that I could take to a job that looks really fascinating and interesting. At that time also, I was taking organic chemistry and I was not loving it. So it was kind of a confluence of, wait a minute, I'm working so hard to try to get like an A minus, B plus. I'm literally sweeping the floors and asking for extra credit for like cleaning the lab because the tests were so hard. So I thought, let me give this a shot. Changed my major to communications, kept my bio minor because I'd already taken so many classes. And it was like a breath of fresh air. Suddenly we're speaking a language that I comprendo. I like totally understand like how to write stories, how to talk to people. I have a natural curiosity. So that lends itself well to the field of journalism. And then I just started getting into local newsrooms and I sucked in the beginning. My first internship was for CNN's SF Bureau. And that's very glamorous and it sounds like an awesome opportunity. But I was such a wallflower. I sat on the desk, I answered the phones, I gathered up enough courage to go out like maybe 2 times with the actual correspondents. And I'm sure they thought she's never going to make it because I didn't show any signs that I knew what I was doing or any confidence in myself. And so after that opportunity that I sort of blew, I thought, you know what, at my next internship, let me be a little more assertive. Let me try to make more of it. I had already like finished my science classes at that point. So I didn't like use my internship time to just like hide at the desk and study too. So I just really put myself out there. Like I was like, can I print a map quest for you? Can I set up an interview for you? And then I also met reporters, I think, that were really gentle and kind and willing to help me along the way. And so that's when I really started this path in broadcast journalism.
I was going to say, you just dated by saying MapQuest.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I'm all about
you
dating.
dated all of us on that one.
Like, if you know MapQuest, you know me.
There you go. Just because I think that investigative journalism is so interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'd love to talk a little bit about that because I think that there are so many different categories and beats of journalists.
Totally.
How did you land on investigative?
So when you start out as a broadcast reporter in general, usually you are a general assignment reporter. You're going to cover everything. You're going to the school board meetings and the town council meetings. You're going to the accidents, the fires. But sometimes you can kind of move your way and specialize a little bit more into a beat.
Yeah.
Some people choose business, some people choose politics. What happened for me was a little bit of happenstance, which honestly happens a lot in life. And I think that is a theme in Boat Baby of just doing the best you can with what you have, because there are so many opportunities and things that will come up that you don't know about or you can't plan for. You can just control how you are in the moment, but then other doors will open. So I was a general assignment reporter for a long, long time. And then I was at the NBC Bay Area station in San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose area. And I would just say yes to other assignments. Aside from, they'd be like, hey, can you come in early? We want you to do this other story with like this esthetician who is withdrawing blood from people, then injecting it back into their faces. They're called vampire facials. And I'd say, okay, like they would want to do these features or other stories that were promotable, but that would require me to work kind of outside my normal hours. I'd have to come in earlier, work in the margins, but I'd say yes, because it was a cool, interesting story, or I'm doing something different. Lo and behold, that leads to a special projects reporter position. They didn't have one before, but because I kept doing those things and they were promoting them, and I guess they were doing well enough, they were like, why don't we just have you do some more of that? So at that time, that was great. I was so happy to get out of the daily grind of doing, every single shooting, accident, terrible thing that was happening, and get to be a little more creative. Then I was pregnant with, I think, my second daughter, and our station decided they were going to go full force into investigative journalism. They were going to build the biggest local investigative reporting unit in the country. 5 on-air reporters, 5 producers. They were bringing in a special manager who had won like many national awards. That was just going to be their commitment. We investigate, holding the powerful accountable. And I'm like getting bigger and bigger. And they tell me, we want to have you join the investigative unit. And I'm thinking, fantastic. That's exciting. I think of investigative journalism as sort of the pinnacle of what we are supposed to do as journalists. Yes, you need people who cover the who, what, when, where, why, but like investigative
ask
journalism
the hard
is
stories,
like the how.
or ask the harder questions, and the how did it come about, and actually report on the facts.
You follow it, you look for the impact, you are really holding the powerful accountable. You're not just giving the thing that happened today, but you're digging deeper. You're using public records, you're, surveilling people. There's hidden camera work involved, because investigative journalism is telling the stories that people don't want you to tell. And so it requires a different level of commitment, time. You need the resources from your newspaper or your television station to allow you to get into it. But those are the stories that change laws and change lives and have the biggest impacts at times. So I remember them saying, look, we want you to do this. And I was like, being the honest person that I am, I really don't know a lot about it. I'm going to do my best. I will go to like the investigative reporters and editors conferences. I will learn as much as I can. And they were really like, okay, we're bringing in people who have a lot of experience. We will all support each other. So I was all in, and also honest with myself about what I needed to learn and how quickly I needed to get up to speed. But then I was also like on maternity leave for 4 or 5 months. So when I came back, the unit had like sort of gelled. Producers were working with reporters. So it was intimidating, to say the least, coming back to this group that was like, we're doing it. But luckily, there was a really great investigative reporter who was our chief of the unit, Tony Kovaleski. And I remember when he came to interview, he said, you know what? Like, I've been doing this for 20 plus years. I will help you. I will answer questions, whatever you need. I believe all boats rise with the tide, or there was some saying he said,
Mm-hmm.
but he impressed on me that I wouldn't be going alone. And sure enough, he lived up to his word, and I could ask all the questions, and I had no problem doing that. I'm like, someone told me once that it took him a long time to figure out like how to ask for help. And I was like, wow, that is not a struggle I have had. I have always known that I need help, and I've always known I'm not the smartest person in the room. So like, that's okay. And I think there's no shame in seeking out the resources that you need to like be better at what you want to get better at.
Have there been stories that have affected you that you haven't been able to just report and walk away from? Like, are there ones that stick in your mind over the past? Like, because I think that you're in a world where it's not positive. When you hear the word investigative, it's and given the environment of the news now, the pace at which the news is happening, coupled with really digging in, what has that been like, both mentally and emotionally for you?
Oh, that's such a great question. And I will say it is important in any profession, but especially right now with the news being kind of nonstop and the cycle is just kind of ubiquitous now because of the 24-hour nature of what we do and streaming and the internet. So I try to do a couple of things. I obviously stay up to date to do my job. I anchor a show 5 days a week for 2 hours in the middle of the day. So we need to know what's happening. I also try to give myself some breaks because I think you can't be in this world all of the time. It's not healthy for anyone. And I'm super grateful that I have daughters and a family that help keep me grounded and allow me to live in the normal things. Like 1 minute you're anchoring a show or you're taping an episode with Kelly Clarkson, and literally an hour later you're at home washing dishes and telling people to, bring you their lunch boxes from downstairs. So I think that trying to lean into the normalcy of what it means to just be a citizen living in the world right now, and a mom and just a friend, like those things help me kind of keep the balance, I would say. But the stories that have not left me are always the ones that involve kids, always the investigations that involve abuse, which I've done child abuse. I have done stories about sexual abuse involving kids at schools and in churches. And I have also done stories about abuse of power. And so I'm grateful that I get to uncover that kind of information and that it leads to change and that it helps me have these conversations with my kids. My kids probably know more than the average bear when it comes to scams and sextortion and all of the things that are happening in the world. As age appropriate as I try to make it for them, I also try not to scare them, but I want to arm them with information. And so I think when you use information to empower yourself, it's kind of the way to get through all the negativity. You go, okay, what can I learn from this story? How do I apply it to my life? And what can I do to make my corner of the world better? That I think is the way to kind of take all of the incoming and not feel powerless and not feel hopeless.
Yeah, taking that knowledge and turning it to use it as power and information to make yourself safer and more comfortable. Is there a story or a topic in that space that you haven't done yet that you really want to dig into?
I'm always open to doing stories about things I haven't done before. Right now, I'm focusing a lot this year on consumer health stories when it comes to microplastics and food additives and artificial ingredients. I feel like that is a really interesting topic that has an impact on so many people. We all eat. We all exist in the world. We all use plastic products and things that contain chemicals that we might not have really thought about. But with the way that things have modernized so quickly over the last 50 years, I'm really interested in looking at how these things are impacting our hormones, our fertility. And there are simple ways that we can try to reduce our exposure to harmful chemicals and products. And I don't think people know all of those avenues yet. So I'm really leaning into that because I think it is such news that you can use. It affects maternal health. It affects children's health. And it's just very consumer friendly. So I've really been leaning into that. But we're working on a story. I can't really talk about it right now, but it has to do with daycares. I'll say that. And this came as a tip from people who watch the Today Show. And it's a great story. So like, I love the fact that my job puts me in front of millions of people and I invite them to tell me their stories and to give me the tips and tell me what I should be investigating, because, you know, people have so many lived experiences and interesting things that are happening. Like, they're the greatest resource for what I should be focusing on, because it's what our viewers care about.
How have you found, as you've ascended in the media world, how have you seen the changes between local and regional to national news and global news?
Resources have been cut dramatically. I think that is the worst part of what's happening, and we're seeing it obviously with layoffs across the federal government. Things are expensive. You know, you're always being asked to do more with less. It heartens me, though, that at the local level, the news is still very relevant, because that's where you live. Your local paper, your local station, they're going to be the most in tune with what's happening in your neighborhood, at your schools, at your place of work, on the streets that you drive. And so that makes me happy to see that the kinds of cuts that we're seeing broadly are a little more blunted in local news. We definitely have been through our times of, you know, kind of resizing and resetting. But my hope is that with AI and the kinds of scams and deep fakes that are coming out, people will need to turn back to reputable media organizations so they can compare and verify what they're seeing. Social media has some positive aspects to it, but what it has done, I think, is really eroded people's ability to tell the truth from fiction. And my hope is that media companies like mine are investing heavily in tools to detect AI and manipulation and fake information, so that, you know, people will be able to trust us, to continue to trust us. So I think that there is a pendulum that is constantly swinging, you know, with people feeling like they can't trust legacy media, to people realizing, well, if you don't trust legacy media, where are you going to get your information? Who are the truth tellers? Who is actually doing the fact checking? And I would always say, get your information from a variety of sources. Obviously, verify what you can firsthand whenever that's possible. Use your common sense and judgment. Don't get caught up in, like, you know, something that you see and it gets you going and you just want to hit share. That is a problem. We can share misinformation and it travels so quickly. So I would just urge people to check their sources, compare sources, and think twice before they share something that, you know, may or may not be true, but is very sensational.
As a journalist, it'd be interesting just to kind of piggyback on that. You know, when we were saying before, the pace of the news has just it's on like 100x.
Yes.
It's going a million miles an hour.
Totally.
As a journalist, how do you stop and you know, I know you probably have fact checkers and so forth, but how do you pause and say, like, is it still gut check? Is it, you know, how do you kind of slow yourself down so you don't hop on these you don't piggyback on some of these national stories that could be complete crap, to be honest with you, or they could be completely true. Like, how do you determine that in terms of what you pursue?
Thankfully, I am in a role where I both anchor the news and I work with teams of producers and fact checkers and researchers, but I also report. I am in the field a bunch. Next week, I'll be in Maine and Boca Raton, Florida. So as much as I can, I'm out there talking to people, interviewing people I wouldn't otherwise cross paths with. I'm always asking questions about the topic at hand, but also, you know, you're somewhere and you see political sign or you see whatever, and you just have these conversations so that you can have a reality check yourself. And I feel like I try the best I can to keep my finger on the pulse of what real Americans are talking about and how they feel. Because we in the news are kind of hyper aware of things. We're moving 100 miles an hour, and that's not how people live. People are thinking about, you know, their grocery prices, getting their kids to practice on time. You know, like, they're not following every little tit for tat, thank goodness, that's coming out of the political world or, you know, things like that. And so I think being in touch with reality and the information people need so that they're informed and they can make smart choices and hopefully educated votes, it's really helpful to have that, like, constant interaction with actual real people and not get caught up in just what I'm reading online or reading in papers, because journalists are biased as well. We try not to be, but I think I learned this. We all have our beliefs. We all have our experiences. We all feel a certain way about whatever topic it is. And our job when we are reporting is to make sure we account for that bias and that we address it and we approach the topic as fairly as we can. But to be fair, you do have to address your own beliefs on any topic.
Yeah. It's interesting just because I think there's this it's like, I'd be curious to know what your advice would be to up and coming journalists right now, just because I think there's so much pressure from a journalist, from a perspective that people are hopping, whether it's print journalism or broadcast, however you want, or the broader spectrum, people are hopping publications, they're hopping homes, what advice would you give them in terms of starting to really build a name? Because the one thing I've noticed is journalists are changing publications or stations and so forth, under a year. So you're not really making a name for yourself. You're just kind of hopping the ladder in so many ways, depending on what that looks like. But what would your advice be to, up and coming journalists in their 20s and people in J school in terms of like, how do you really build a substantial long-term career within this environment, especially with streaming and so many different other platforms that people can find their news?
They have to be on social only or
I would say your credibility is everything. Your credibility is your currency. So if you are concerned about building your name or your reputation, you should be pursuing stories aggressively and truthfully and accurately, and the reputation will come. The audience will come. I'm lucky in the sense I've kind of had guardrails and safely worked at I've worked at Fox, I've worked at ABC, I've worked at NBC locally and now nationally. I've worked for a 24-hour cable channel when I first started out. So I've had a chance to work across different affiliates and different companies and been under different ownership groups as well. And I think for me, because people always ask like, well, do your bosses tell you you need to report in a certain way or ask a certain question? No, they don't. I pitch the stories that come from my sources or my experiences or emails or things I'm interested in. And then I go to the subject matter experts and I interview them. And if it's a controversial topic, I make sure I include voices from the multiple sides. There may be more than two sides. And I think that you have to trade on that. You have to put good work out there that is truthful, and you hopefully shine a spotlight on an issue or a person, or you platform something that, people don't know about that spurs their curiosity and dialogue. So, I mean, journalists are the recorders of the first draft of history. So get it right as much as you possibly can. Own it when you don't, and know that it's a job that you have to be persistent with and that it's tough and it's going to be full of ups and downs. But ultimately, if you let the stories guide you and you do the best that you can to tell them as honestly as you can, you're going to be fine. And we need you. We need you to be a journalist. And what a privilege it is to be able to go get information, distill it down, and then present it to people. That is just like an awesome responsibility, but it's a gift and a privilege too.
That's amazing advice.
Yeah, it is great advice. I mean, we see you, anchoring and like you and doing your afternoon show, and then obviously doing your more investigative, deeper stories. Do you have a preference of which style or that you like, that you're doing now, that you like or don't like?
It really is a combo platter, I have to say. I'm very lucky to get to do this, and it wasn't part of the grand plan. When I came to NBC News, I was an investigative and consumer correspondent. Then that changed to senior consumer investigative correspondent. Now it's chief. So luckily, I've been able to kind of sort of progress in that way and really like own the consumer and investigative beat, which is a big umbrella. It's like health issues, it's product, it's travel tips, it's personal finance. So I am happy that I get to play in that space because consumer touches everything. And then, as an Asian American reporter, I do like to try to platform people who are doing interesting things in underrepresented communities. So, when I can do those features and profiles, I love to. And then having a show to exercise the hosting and anchoring skills, which are very different, is great because it's just like you get to play a bunch of different positions on the team. So I'm grateful that I have that opportunity. My brain gets a little frazzled sometimes because I don't believe in multitasking. I think you're just switching from thing to thing. And sometimes
Yes.
that can be really exhausting and you might not be your best. So I'm trying to really be present in whatever I'm doing. If I'm anchoring, I'm anchoring. I'm trying to make it the best 2 hours of TV that I can. If I'm guest hosting on the Today Show, I'm having fun because we're eating cool food, or we're meeting a great actor who's, talking about their latest project, or we're doing something fun on the plaza. I do love the fact that I get to bring all the pieces of my personality to this job. I'm really grateful that I had my 3 kids before I came to the network, because being a mom and working at this level, and our audience being a lot of working moms and moms in general and women, it just feels great because I know that I'm talking to people and trying to answer questions that they have because they're the same questions that I have.
Mm-hmm. The NBC team is so legendary, and Craig and Hoda and Savannah, I talk like I know them. Has that been just as amazing as it looks to be a part of that team, and the legendary women that are part of that team? How has that experience been? Who was there? Was it Savannah, and who was there when you first started? I can't
Savannah and
remember.
Craig were the first 2 to welcome me to the Today Show
Savannah
because
and Craig.
Hoda
Okay.
was on parental leave with her second baby, Hope.
Oh, okay.
So when I
Okay.
came in April of 2019, it was actually Savannah and Craig. And my first story, believe it or not, tariffs. It was during Trump's first term, and he was talking about tariffs against
Oh,
China.
okay.
So, I mean, can you just believe in
circle.
6 years what a crazy full circle moment? Now,
Right.
Hoda is still with NBC News. She's still doing her podcast and all of the good
Yeah.
things. But now
Yep.
it is Craig and Savannah are the actual team. So that's just very
Yeah.
serendipitous how that all worked out. But I can tell you from day one how warm and kind and welcoming Craig and Savannah were, and Al as well, of course. And then when I got to know Dylan and Chanel, they are who you think they are, and in the best possible way. And I think that is what makes the Today Show so special. You do want to wake up with these people. They are your friends. I mean, Carson is hilarious, just as he is on television. Jenna, just as warm as she comes across. That was a very pleasant surprise, because I have been in other situations where you meet people and you think they are a certain way based on, who you've seen on screen, but then behind the scenes, it's a little bit different. That can be disappointing sometimes. For me, coming to the Today Show and realizing, wow, not only are these people who I hoped they would be, but now I get to see up close and personal how hard they work and the stuff that they're doing. For them to make it look as easy as they make it look, to effortlessly go from, a town hall where you're grilling the president to Bobby Flay grilling a steak, right? That is usually the people who excel at one or the other. They're not in the same body. They're not Savannah Guthrie. So getting to see how she does it all, and also knowing 1 minute she's on a plane talking to someone in DC, she's taking an overnight flight to go, talk to someone else, and then flying back to anchor the Today Show the next morning. I definitely recognize that the people who make it look the easiest are also working really hard and have done a lot to get to that point where it comes out so effortlessly. Or it appears to come out so effortlessly, I should say.
Yeah, no, it does. It definitely does. Do your daughters, are they interested in following your footsteps? I know they're not old enough yet, but are they showing signs of wanting to, are they investigative?
It's super interesting. I think they're very curious, which I think I try to give them that permission and license to say, ask questions about things that you don't understand. Be inquisitive. Ask the extra question or say the extra sentence when you're in an environment, because you never know where that conversation will go. But I don't think they want to be journalists, and I'm okay with it. This is a tough job. I would support them 100%, in whatever venture that they choose to pursue, but they're all really creative. They're different than I am. They're different than my husband. So we'll see. The jury's still out, but nobody right now is like, Mommy, I would like to become a journalist. Not even close.
They're not writing articles and
Well,
putting a
what's
microphone.
funny? Actually, I just discovered a month ago, my oldest daughter, who's a sophomore, she actually has written a couple of articles for her school paper, and she never mentioned it to me, and it never came up in conversation.
That's funny.
So she did do it. She is part of a club, but she's a part of a lot of different clubs. And and to be honest, I would say to them, it's tough, and they see what it entails and how hard it is to get to a job like this where you have some autonomy. I'm so lucky, and it's very rare. I truly know what a dream job this role is. It doesn't even exist at some of the other networks. Some people will do some consumer reporting, but they're also doing general assignment. They're also traveling at the drop of a hat. It's tough to be home. My travel, when I do travel, it's planned. I know where I'm going. I look forward to going on these little day trips and things like that. It's really fun.
Right.
But that is not the general life for a lot of network correspondents. You are on the road and it's not under your control. And I just, for my daughters, I'm hoping, well, number one, I actually really hope they'll go into business together and like live in the same place and we can all be a part of a compound. I don't know that that's going to happen, but that's kind of how I'm steering them. Like, start a business, guys. That's my dream, is like, they'll be entrepreneurs and all work together.
Yeah. Oh, that's an amazing dream. I think that's the American dream for all families,
for all of us,
right?
all of us. In the book, you mention it a couple of times about, your mom had kind of the philosophy of don't fret about, things you can't control. And you talking about how important was that as you were, you bring it up in the book a few different times where it came back to you, but how important was that to have that philosophy and her model it for you, and then you be able to, and now you modeling it for your own children? Because it's such an unusual, you mentioned it, for an Asian immigrant family, it was a very unusual philosophy.
I think that my parents were big believers, both of them actually, in kind of fate. They really believe in life happens and you need to control your reaction to it, and you can control how you move through it. But literally, they got on a boat to try to get to a refugee camp to eventually get to America. There was so much they couldn't control. And I think that because they gave themselves to that idea that, look, there is a higher power, things are going to happen, and we will have to react to them. When you make a decision like that, that kind of is ingrained in you and kind of how you're going to live your life. And I think by osmosis, it came to me, and I realized that it's a nice way of going through life. It's not to say you shouldn't plan or you shouldn't try your best. It's just to say, do your best and forget the rest. That's like a motto my kids told me about when they were like in second grade. I think it was in one of my daughter's second grade classes. She came home with the thing and it said that. And I was like, what a great mantra. What a great mantra to teach kids, but also what a great thing to live by as a grown-up. Do your best, right? Like, do the work, show up, be ready, and then forget the rest, because you can't control it anyway. So, like, if you do that, I think it makes you overly anxious and worrisome. And I don't think a lot of good comes from worrying about things. Plan, prepare, great. Worry, it seems like a waste of time.
Yeah, that's a great philosophy. I hope that when you mentioned it, I was like, oh, I need to do that more. That's a great philosophy. Well, Vicky, I know I want to be conscious of time. I can't believe it's already been almost an hour, but thank you. It has been so lovely to meet you. We loved Boat Baby. It was, like you said, just the vulnerability, the humanity of it. There was another piece of it that I felt. Renee and I both are, older moms, and there's this kind of sandwich generation term where, we have our parents late, as we still have younger children. And, when I was thinking about some of the stories that you tell, like, that was your experience, all along. And that it wasn't just, as your kids were, as your parents were aging, or as your kids were, that, that really multicultural life is something that you felt like you had to do, and that was dutiful. You said you're, being the dutiful daughter. Do you feel like there was such a benefit there to have that all along? And, what we may come into a little later in life that you experienced, I feel like there was so much benefit to that all along.
100%. That idea of a multicultural and a multi-generational household, it's really common in a lot of cultures. It's maybe not as common in American culture. This idea like, you're 18, you're out of the house. Why? It doesn't make sense. I mean, 18, you're still a baby. And if you can live with your parents and save money when you're going to school or starting off in your workplace, I mean, I always joke that like, you wonder why, these immigrant families suddenly like everybody's a homeowner or something. Yeah, because they all lived like 6 families in an apartment until everybody saved up so much they could actually go out and put a down payment.
Right.
It's not glamorous. It's not, like something people are used to, but I think we should destigmatize it. I think you should live in a way that makes sense for you and really optimizes your resources. And like for my daughters to get to know their maternal grandparents and have them be such an integral part of their life is such a blessing. I wish that like we were still closer to Brian's parents, obviously, because I wish that they had that same geographical closeness, because you can't put a price tag on that. Look, I get it. Not everybody can like get along with their parents. And believe me, like there are trying times in the household, no question about it, especially with my dad and I being so similar and also like butting heads. And, it is not like a walk in the park. But the benefits of just those relationships, our parents are going to be with us forever, right? And if they can help you, if they want to help you, wonderful. And I get it. Like sometimes people want to retire and they want to hang out with the grandkids sometimes, and they don't want to be like the full-time caretakers. But I do think it has kept my parents young. I do think it has kept them very purposeful. And, maybe if they had big careers and they were doing other things or they were traveling or they, if that wasn't their preference, and I always try to check in with them and say like, is this still working for you? Would you prefer that we got some help or more help so you could go travel or do your own thing? And they're kind of like, what else would we rather be doing? So I'm grateful and I'm lucky that that's how they feel. I think I'll feel that way for my 3 daughters. But there are going to be 3 people and I don't know how to split myself in 3. Like, that's why I really want them to like do a business together, live in a compound together, and then I can help all 3 of you. That's like really
It's very
the
practical.
dream, right? Because I know how hard it is. Like it is. How could my husband be a busy doctor and I be this busy journalist? None of this happens without the glue that is my parents who are at home because, so-and-so has a half day. Oh, so-and-so's sick. Can you run and grab them? Or like, school lunches, coming up with 5 ideas for 3 people every day. Like there are so many things big and small that when you have more people on your team, it just makes your life that much more rich. And so, yes, there are definitely wrinkles and conflicts and like, we need our space from each other too. But I am by and large very grateful for our multicultural, multi-generational household. Like I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I know it doesn't work for everyone, but I would say like, if it does work for you, that's awesome. And so many people in so many other countries do it that way.
Yeah.
And it's just great. So
it's a beautiful part of the story.
Oh, completely. It's so interesting because my husband grew up in England. So my in-laws live over in England. So when they come over for like a month.
Yeah.
They'll like, and when I first met him, I was like, wait, what? Because it was like, wait a minute, what do you mean they're coming in for like 2 to 4 weeks?
Right.
And now when they come over, it's just pure joy across the family. It's just like everybody knows their space, everybody knows their roles. It's like home cooked meals. It's such a different world and it's such a pleasure and it's such a light.
I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so happy that you have that, right? Because a month with people that you don't normally live with can be a journey. But like for the food alone, I mean, my parents and what they cook and what they make for us, like we're so spoiled. And people are like, oh, how did you get your kids to like vegetables? And you're like, because they're delicious. I don't know, because my parents cook things that are yummy. Like
my mother-in-law, completely. She cooks every meal. Like they go to the store every day. And I'm like,
same.
I wish I had time for that, but I don't, but I appreciate it. And there's always just some beautiful meal cooked and on the table at 6 o'clock. That's like, she's just picked out of the thin air.
Come on.
And you're just like, okay.
Life gold medal. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what is it about really at the end of the day? If we can all kind of do what we're hoping to do and like be happy with our day and people are filling in where they can, like you said, everyone has a role. We know what we're doing, like optimizing the village, right? Optimizing the team. That's what it's about.
100%. 100%. So
yeah, no, that was it's a fantastic message. I loved that whole thread through the book. Well, Vicky, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, it has been such a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, I have enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to read Boat Baby, for your really thoughtful questions. I really loved this conversation.
Thank you, and I
Same
know
here.
our listeners are going to as well. So thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to In Her Words. We hope you'll join us at womenandentertainment.com and go to our Substack for extended interviews and behind-the-scenes access.